How could you keep that one quiet then? So in the Gospel reading, we've got two stories, obviously, as they unfold before us. We have the initial story of Jairus and his plea to Jesus on behalf of his dying daughter. And then we have the story of the woman with the hemorrhage. And they both become a mirror in which we see reflected what our response should be to difficult situations. Now, Jairus is described as an important, influential man, but it was obvious that he'd got a big problem, and it was getting more and more serious as the minutes ticked away, that his daughter was sick and dying. She was 12 years old, and as any father would, he loved his daughter deeply. There's no doubt that he could have afforded the best of the possible healthcare that was available at the time, but it wasn't working. She was dying, and the medics were powerless to do anything about it. There was only one thing left to do, in his mind anyway, and that is to approach Jesus. Jairus came to Jesus because he loved his daughter. He came because he believed that Jesus could and would do something. The woman in the story, unlike the child, had suffered greatly for 12 years. Her situation was bleak. And because of her condition, she was classed as being unclean, was treated as an outcast. Anyone she touched would become unclean as well. So people would shun her. She too had spent everything that she had to try and stop the hemorrhage, but again to no avail. Now, with 12 years or so of blood loss, or a long time of blood loss, her health would have been in a very, very bad way as well. I don't know if you're familiar with anemia, but go look it up or Google it and you'll find out. She'd also heard about Jesus, the miracle worker. And Jesus was her last best hope for the future. She came because she had faith. She came, and as we've heard, she touched the hem of his garment, and she was healed. When desperate needs confront us, when we reach the end, will we reach out in faith, or will we give up? Now, that's a question that some people can answer here and answer honestly, but I'm not going to go into that at this moment in time. Jesus took with him to Jairus' house, as we've heard, certain disciples. Now, have you ever wondered why he took those disciples? I personally think he needed people around him who were open and supportive to his ministry about what he was doing. I believe faith works best in certain circumstances where there is openness and expectancy. God, not all the time, but sometimes moves mightily. Opening this to a wider perspective, and this is what I want to focus on this morning, is we do have more than our fair share of people, and when it comes to new ways of doing things, say, it looks great, but it won't work here. Or they say, yes, but. By our negative attitudes, we put limitations on what God will do for us, in us, and through us. I mean, for instance, can you imagine this place full of people again from July the 19th onwards? You don't have to answer that, it's a rhetorical question. By our negative attitudes, we can put limitations on what God will do for us, in us, and through us. In our day, negativity, the yes but is powerful and usually wins. It's not normally the whole congregation, by the way. It's normally one or two individuals who've got big gobs who do that, but then nobody else says, shut up. The yes but attitude usually wins. That attitude makes us sane, sober, prudent and competent. But it can also drive us to despair, fatigue, cynicism and even brutality. And you see this in the context of Jesus' ministry. Can you imagine, Jesus asks, can you imagine a woman healed after 12 years of serious illness, of hemorrhage? Can you imagine a dead child raised to new life? Can you imagine God hung on a tree? Can you imagine God's incredible capacity for newness of life? To all these things I could say yes during the under 3 years, 2 years and 7 months of Maggie's fight with cancer, with brain tumour. I did imagine Maggie being healed at that time. But it didn't happen in this life. So can you imagine God's incredible capacity for new life? I still think the answer is yes. And to answer questions on possibly, you might think, well, why isn't Mike talking about healing? Yes, I do believe in healing, and I will continue to pray for healing. And sometimes God will allow us to borrow from his tomorrow today. But meanwhile, when we have our lives governed by our proud capacity to control, or our fearful need to control, we resist God's power for newness. We will always get people in a congregation saying no to this, no to that, etc., etc. We deny God's freedom to give gifts. In effect, we kill our faith, we dull our expectancy, we deny the truth of it all, and we hold on grimly to the old ways of doing things. I mean, for heaven's sake, why have we still got pews in here? Not many churches have pews anymore. You know, why haven't we got a multimedia screen here? Somebody working, Chris perhaps, at the back there, full media system with a PowerPoint presentation, no more need for paperwork, flashing here, there and everywhere, clips, this, that and the other.
We haven't got a leader who would be able to use it though, have we?
But everything's doable now on an iPad. Just bang, 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 bang. Yeah. Our Jesus is bigger than all the problems that we see. He continually asks, can we imagine? Most of the time in our lives, we know the yes but wins. But by God's powerful grace, the yes buts of our resistance can be broken and newness appears and miracles can happen. There may well come a time where the pews are replaced by nice, comfortable chairs. There may come a time where we do have a media system. We come a time where we have an organist. Trinity back up singing again on a regular basis, singing hymns. Who knows? Miracles happen. I hope that when Jairus embraces his resurrected daughter, he also embraces a new vision of who God is and what God values. In Jairus' story, Jesus demands that we don't see death where he sees life. I suppose that's the whole question, isn't it? Do we see death or do we see life? In the bleeding woman story, he demands that legalism give way to love every single time. In each story, Jesus restores a lost child of God to community and intimacy. In each story, Jesus embraces what is impure, the menstruating woman, the dead body, in order to practice mercy. In each story, a previously hopeless daughter goes in peace because Jesus isn't a pronouncer of death. He is the giver of new life. And he wants to give us new life here. So, what is asleep in each one of us that Jesus might awaken? What do we have to push through in order to grab hold of God's boundless compassion? You may have heard of the following words: ghosting, yes, gaslighting, cancelling somebody. Have you heard about these things? Yeah? All these things happened to Jesus. Just to remind you, ghosting is the practice of ending a personal relationship with someone by suddenly and without explanation withdrawing from all communication. Gaslighting, trying to manipulate someone by psychological means into doubting their own sanity. Cancelled, usually someone is said to be cancelled after it has been discovered they are perceived to have done something offensive. It involves gossiping about the person's perceived bad behaviour, boycotting their work, and trying by seditious means to take away their public platform and power by whatever means possible. All that happened to Jesus. Even during the time he was with Jairus and with that woman, there were the naysayers involved in that. And it happens now in our congregation, or congregations. The best thing about Christianity is the people. But the worst thing about Christianity is also the people. What hierarchies, taboos, dislikes, prejudices, and scepticism stand in our way of receiving God's love, of God's new start, of God's dream for this place? When we look at what we say, do, and think, can we be really honest with ourselves? Dare we trust and let go and let God? These questions will be asked long after I've gone. But they are our questions. So may we continually ask those questions, face up to them, love them, and live into them, and let God do the rest. Amen.